This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
What's up, Detroit sports fans? Welcome to the Fan Report, show made by fans for fans, powered by the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I'm Nick, and with me is Xander's going to give us this week's topics.
Well, the Pistons are currently in the midst of a 12-game losing streak, and the Lions just let a team put up its highest point total since 2018. I don't really want to talk about either of them, but let's talk about it. It's a Fan Report.
Well, we are on episode number 137. And in those 137 episodes, we have had next to no success on either of the two teams we've talked about. That's not fun.
Have we covered a playoff run for?
See, I was trying. As I was saying that, I was literally trying to think: was the Bucks series during while we were recording this? I think it was.
I want to say yes, but we all knew we were going to get swept,
and they got demolished. Yes.
Yeah. It was even a competitive sweep like Cleveland a few years before.
It was a 4-game sweep where the Bucks just destroyed us in every facet of the game.
Well, really, we should have just thrown up the mercy flag after 2 games.
Shit, after one, the way that it looked, in all honesty. But that's beside the point. I don't even know what to start off with this week because both are painful to talk about. I'll say, you know what? Let's start off with the Lions. I feel like we can get through them a little bit quicker.
Let's get them out of the way.
I do feel like I have a little bit more invested into the Pistons conversation today because I want to touch on something we mentioned last week, or at least I said last week, and actually really kind of tried to drive home last week also. I want to touch on something there, among some other things that we've seen. So let's kick it off with the Lions. Andrew, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, so the Lions went out and got demolished by Denver. I mean, it was a game for the first half, but then they really got away. All the under-betters, including myself, as bad as the Lions have been, still did not anticipate them letting the Denver Broncos put up 38 points, a number that they have not exceeded since 2018.
Do you have the exact date in 2018?
Yes, it was October 2018. I want to say October 14th.
That's a long time ago. That's 3 years. Think about it this way. We started doing the podcast with Detroit Sports Podcast in what, February of 2018?
Somewhere around there.
So that was in the first year of us doing this podcast.
They did reach 38 one other time, almost 2 years ago to the day against the Texans.
38 or 31?
38. They put up 38 on us on Sunday. They put up 38. So basically they tied their highest point total since 2018.
That's pretty bad. Pretty bad.
I mean, the under looks like a lock, honestly, on Sunday. I'm so upset.
Well, I mean, when you've got teams quarterbacked by Jared Goff and Teddy Bridgewater, you'd think so, yes. I would say definitely hammer the under. But now.
I wonder if Jerry Jacobs hadn't actually gotten hurt early in the game, if we would have been able to at least hold him to 31. That's all I needed. I just need to hold him to 31. That's all I needed. But no, they had to get to 38.
Well, leave it to the Lions to break your heart in every possible way. But anyways, I really don't even know that I have too much to say about this game.
No.
None of it surprised me knowing going in the Lions
beating a dead horse.
Well, they were super shorthanded going into it. And when you already have a bad football team, and then you add the fact that they're shorthanded, it's going to be ugly. And it was.
Yeah.
They looked okay after the first half, and then they came out in the second half and turned the ball over and just looked like straight duds on offense and couldn't stop a damn thing on defense. So it really wasn't much beyond what I expected. And there's not much else to say about it. They played terrible in every facet of the game.
It was really the Broncos' biggest margin of victory all season. The Jets even lost by less.
That's pretty bad. I'll say that.
And the Jets didn't put up a point in that game.
The Jets got shut out and still lost by less? Ouch.
That's how bad the Broncos offense
coming
is.
Into this game, the defense had been playing some solid football, holding some decent teams to low point totals.
covering basically every week.
Yeah, but I mean, you have to figure what the Lions are missing on the defense side of the ball, losing Jerry Jacobs to the ACL injury, and just the amount of players who were out sick with COVID and the flu. And I don't want to say the deck was stacked against them, but this is already a bad football team, and you took players away from it, so it was never going to end well.
But what we really want to talk about with the Lions is we have Todd McShay's, I believe, first mock draft for 2022. And obviously the Lions have the first overall pick in said mock draft. But Todd McShay is now fueling the debate of Aiden Hutchinson versus Kayvon Thibodeau with that number 1 pick. I mean, I feel like just like 3-4 weeks ago, it was Kayvon Thibodeau, no question. And then Aiden Hutchinson did what he did against Ohio State. And
it wasn't just what he did against Ohio State. It was how he ended basically the entire final month of the season. It dominated against Ohio State, played well against Michigan State, if I recall. And then he dominated against Iowa as well. Like, he cemented himself as one of the top pass rushers in college football in the last month of the year. And where you have Kayvon Thibodeau, who had some opt-outs and wasn't playing a full slot of games, like that's, it does raise the question of which guy. And the recency bias would tell you, well, it's Aiden Hutchinson. He showed to be the best defensive end or pass rusher in college football. And Kayvon Thibodeau, well, because of opt-outs, did not.
But the interesting thing is, and I think what the main driver of this debate is that Kayvon Thibodeau, in terms of pure skill, is the better defensive end on paper. But it's hard to argue that Aiden Hutchinson hasn't been better, especially over the last month.
Right. It's hard to argue production. Yeah. The thing is about Aiden Hutchinson, the thing about Aiden Hutchinson is he's got a work ethic that I don't know that Kayvon Thibodeau has. Like, Aiden Hutchinson is a try-hard guy.
Yeah.
But he's also extremely talented.
You're not wrong.
And that's one of the things
he's extremely what? Sorry, talk
talented.
Talented.
And not saying Kayvon Thibodeau isn't, but I mean, he doesn't seem to have as much of the heart that a guy like Aiden Hutchinson has. And a lot of it probably has to do with the lack of success from his team and, other aspects of it. But either way, it really is a tough call. And in all honesty, it's going to come down to, I don't like putting a lot of weight in the combine, but in a case like this, maybe the combine does make a difference because that's where we're really going to be able to see some footwork, some technique. How do these guys' speeds measure up? How do their strengths measure up? Excuse me. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying I agree. Like, I feel like this is not going to be settled until draft day. I feel like the combine is going to be a major factor. I feel like this is going to be a thing where, like, interviews become a major factor, how they performed in team interviews. Like, yeah, I don't. Now, what if Aiden Hutchinson goes into the game against Georgia and absolutely puts up a dud of a game?
I still think the conversation's going to be, the media is going to pen Aiden Hutchinson. Like, they're going to push for Aiden Hutchinson to go to the Lions. I think he's done enough to get the media's attention in the mock drafts at the very least. The Lions may see a different picture. Now, the one thing that I will say about Aiden Hutchinson that kind of rubbed me a little bit the wrong way, but I don't know if you saw his interview, but he even said that he's not really a Lions fan. They're not successful. He didn't grow up a Lions fan. He doesn't want to root for, or he didn't want to root for a team that has never won anything. And not say I don't blame him. Like, I don't blame him.
I definitely don't blame him.
But at the same time, people who want to paint this picture of, a local guy coming in to be a hometown hero and how much it'll be great for the city of Detroit and the Detroit Lions. Well, I mean, he doesn't even like the team. So how is that? How are we going to paint this guy as a hometown hero when he's not even a fan? Like, he doesn't want to. He didn't exactly make it known that he wants to play for the Lions. In fact, it kind of sounded like he doesn't want to play for the Lions. So that probably will stick out a little bit to the Lions front office, and I think it should. Like, if a guy doesn't want to play for you, why would you want him here?
But did he? I don't think he said
he didn't. He didn't say he doesn't want to play here. He just said, "I've never been a fan of the team, and they're never successful."
Yeah.
So that's why. But does that exactly give you the idea that he wants to play for you? No.
But he went on to say, like, he thinks he'd be great and that he'd be like the hometown hero all over again kind of thing.
I don't buy it. I'll be honest with you. I put more emphasis on him saying he's never been a fan of the team and he doesn't want to be a fan of a team who's never been successful. Like that's called talking out of both sides of your mouth right there. And frankly, I think the truth usually lies on the negative when you're talking out of both sides of your mouth because you're just trying to cover your ass. That's personally what I believe. And you can say I'm jaded or whatever, I don't care, but that's personally what I believe. I don't think the guy wants to play for the Lions. If he gets drafted, he'll take the paycheck and he'll come here, but we may be looking at another Ndamukong Suh situation where, it's just another year closer to free agency.
Oh, I mean, it could just be a thing where he's being honest. Again, I didn't grow up a Lions fan, but I would relish the opportunity to be a hometown hero. Like, I think it's just him being honest. That's my take on it. But
frankly, if it were a guy who grew up here, and I would prefer it to be a guy who was a fan of the team growing up, because there's just that extra level of effort you want to give to a team that you grew up loving. That if you grew up in the area and didn't grow up as a fan of the team, you don't have that extra level of effort that you want to give. And frankly, I'd argue
it's not like Kayvon Thibodeau is going to come in and be like,
no, but I would argue that a guy who openly admits he doesn't like the team, I would argue that guy, the team that he grew up around, he doesn't want to play for you, so he's not going to give the same effort he would to another team out there. Versus a guy who has no correlation to this team whatsoever. Like, he'll play for anybody as long as it's not a team he hates. You know what I mean?
I mean, yeah, you could very well be right. It's all speculation at this point. All I'm saying is I'm not going to, if through this draft process, I come to the conclusion that from what I've seen in the combine and everything, that I come to the conclusion that I think I'd rather have Aiden Hutchinson. I'm not going to let that piece sway me from it.
And I'm not either. If Aiden Hutchinson looks like the better prospect, I'm going after Aiden Hutchinson, no question. Yeah. Like there's no doubt about that. I'm just saying that there is, it is something to think about and something that would give me a little bit of concern. Because I'll be straight with you. I don't want another situation like what we had with Ndamukong Suh, where all he cares about is making the paycheck. He doesn't want to be here. And that very well possibly could be what you're staring at with Aiden Hutchinson. And not say it isn't what you could be staring at with Kayvon Thibodeau either. But I think that, he played his cards a little bit here and didn't hold them as close as he probably should have in this situation. Because I think it's a very realistic scenario to say that Aiden Hutchinson could just be waiting for that second contract and it ain't going to be with you. And that's what my fear is here. Because we are talking about a number one overall pick. And to lose a number one overall pick after their rookie deal, if he is successful, that hurts an organization a lot, in a big way. So the Lions are going to have to do some homework on this one. Does this guy want to
100%.
Does he want to be here? Because if not, well, then you got to look elsewhere.
And I'm also the belief that I just, at this point in time, I don't think there is a wrong decision between Aiden Hutchinson and Kayvon Thibodeau. I have where I lean.
There's not.
But there's, as of right now, there's nothing that screams bust from either of these guys yet. Now, there are things that worry me a little bit more about Kayvon Thibodeau and Aiden Hutchinson. There are things that I like a little more about Kayvon Thibodeau than I like about Aiden Hutchinson. Aiden Hutchinson probably seems like the safer pick to me. Kayvon Thibodeau seems like the higher upside if you can put it all together.
And that's the way I view it. Like I think there are more question marks with Kayvon Thibodeau than there are Aiden Hutchinson. But there are also the highs of the highs of Kayvon Thibodeau I like more than the highs of Aiden Hutchinson. And, which side do you want to lean more towards? And that's what the debate's going to be. I don't think like you mentioned, I don't think there's a wrong answer with either one of them. I think they'll both be good NFL players. And we're also not talking about players who are looked at to be measured up there with the Myles Garretts of the world. Like, these guys aren't supposed to be like Nick Bosa or Joey Bosa or Myles Garrett. Like, they're not that good. They're really good, but they're not that good.
Kayvon was billed as being that good. It's just he hasn't
originally
been
yes.
Good
I've heard the closest thing I've heard to being called that good is he is the closest thing we've had to Myles Garrett since Myles Garrett. Which fair comparison. That's not wrong. He just isn't quite that good from what we've seen.
Yeah.
Hopefully
there's a yet at the end. Hopefully there's a yet at the end.
As long as he's here. If he's not here, I don't care.
Yeah. Now, Todd McShay did mock the entire first round, meaning he did have the second first rounder of the Lions mocked. Currently, that first rounder is projected to be at number 25. Nick, and I will tell you all, it is a quarterback. Nick, did you want me to give you who the quarterback was, then who was taken, what quarterback was taken before, or do you want me to tell you all the quarterbacks taken before.
Give me the quarterbacks taken before, and I'll give you who I think it's probably going to be. Not necessarily who I want, but who I think it'll probably be.
Okay. So the first quarterback off the board, a little earlier than I thought, he has Kenny Pickett going 12 to the Pittsburgh Steelers out of Pittsburgh.
So Kenny Pickett is regarded as the highest ranked quarterback as of right now. That is, yeah.
I'm just saying I didn't expect a quarterback to go at 12. I didn't think any quarterback was good enough to go at 12.
It's a quarterback-driven league. They're always going to be bumped up. Like, do you really think guys like Justin Fields and Zach Wilson would have been in the top 5 the way they were in most years? Probably not. At least not all grouped up like that. They probably would have been spread out amongst 15 to 20. But the way the league is gone, the quarterback position's taken higher than it probably should be. And that's just how it's going to be.
And then the Washington football team taking Matt Corral out of Ole Miss. That's the second quarterback off the board in the first round. Denver Broncos get Liberty QB Malik Willis. That's a third quarterback gone in the first round. That's at number 17. And then at 19, the Saints grab Cincy's QB Desmond Ridder. So you already have 4 quarterbacks off the board between picks 12 and 19. Does that surprise you at all?
Yeah, a little bit, because I don't think this is a year where that makes a whole bunch of sense. Like,
meaning the Lions taking a quarterback at 25 would be 5 quarterbacks winning the first round.
Right, and taking 5 quarterbacks spread across that far, like that, you're getting kind of the bottom of the barrel with quarterbacks there. And frankly, by the sounds of it, the quarterbacks that's going to be going here is Sam Howell, because Spencer Rattler's probably going back to school next year, considering he transferred to South Carolina. So it's probably going to be Sam Howell from North Carolina.
And it is.
And he's coming off of and I know he was looked at as one of the top 2 guys last year, but he's coming off of a really bad year at North Carolina. So, how much confidence does this guy still have in his own game?
And confidence is a big part of being a good quarterback.
Absolutely. And it's not just confidence. It's confidence. It's intelligence. It's able to read the defense. And I know that he lost a lot to graduation or transfers or the drafts this past season, but regardless, he was not great. And I know he didn't have much around him, but he didn't exactly do anything to make any of his teammates better either. Like it was just a bad situation for everybody this year at North Carolina.
Yeah. No, he significantly regressed, it feels like, from last year to this year. And I've been the one saying I want the Lions to use that second first-round pick to take a stab at a quarterback. But I was hoping to be able to take a shot at someone a little more exciting, like a Malik Willis, for example, even though I really feel like it's not going to work out with Malik Willis, but it's at least a more fun QB to take a shot on.
Yeah, Malik Willis is a name, sure, but he's one of those guys that I can see just failing out of the league in his first year. Like, he's either going to be really good or really bad. Yep. And a guy like that at the school he went to, I just don't see him being worthy of a first-round pick whatsoever. And that's not to say I think Sam Howell is, but in this league, if you're going to take a quarterback here, that's what that's what you got to do. But I don't think Malik Willis really measures up to it, considering where he played.
Well, here's my question: do you like all 4 quarterbacks listed going ahead of him more than Sam Howell?
So we're talking Kenny Pickett, Matt Corral,
Malik Willis, and Desmond Ridder.
Malik Willis and Desmond Ridder. The only one really that's a huge question mark for me is Malik Willis, because you're drafting purely on speculation and upside with Malik Willis, which is kind of true with all of them, but at the same time, some of these guys have a little bit more proven than a guy like Malik Willis who played at Liberty. So yes and no. I'll probably say yes. I like the talent of those guys, but again, it was Sam Howell. You got to remember, this guy was one of the top 2 quarterback prospects in college football coming into the season, and because he lost so much due to multiple circumstances, he wasn't able to really showcase himself. But I mean, that type of situation.
I can't say I'm watching North Carolina football this year, so I don't know.
I don't blame him, but it just puts a bad image into a quarterback's mind when they have a bad season like that. That's all.
Yeah, but I'm still pretty. Then again, I have not done much work on the draft yet, considering we're more than 4 months out here. But
right, I mean,
at this point in time, I am still good taking a swing at a quarterback with that late first round pick. Personally,
see, here's where I'm actually going to disagree with you. If you are in a spot, if you're drafting 15 or if you're drafting somewhere between 15 and 20, yeah, then you can take a stab at a quarterback because you're probably getting like the third or fourth quarterback off the board at that point. But by the looks of it, that pick's not going to be there. If you're picking 25th and your option is Sam Howell,
you wouldn't take a swing there?
Part of me wants to say yes, but the reason I wouldn't say yes is because of two reasons, actually. One, you have so many other holes to fill on this roster that, like, taking the 5th best quarterback in the first round probably doesn't fill that need. Not long term, anyways. And you have so many other needs that, whether you take a wide receiver, that probably fills a need long term. A cornerback, that probably fills a need long term. Safety probably fills a need long term. Another pass rusher fills a need long term. Linebacker probably fills a need long term. Offensive lineman probably fills a need long term. Like, the list goes so far of what you need that you can fill long term at 25, whereas taking a quarterback there probably doesn't fill that need long term. And the second reason is because by taking a quarterback at 25 in this year's draft, that decreases the likelihood that they take a quarterback in next year's draft in a big way. So you are basically hinging on Sam Howell working out.
That wouldn't be like, if I'm advocating for taking a quarterback, I would be doing that with the idea that we still, like, obviously we probably wouldn't end up starting Sam Howell, but like, that wouldn't bar us from taking someone who could be a much better candidate.
See, I would advocate for starting Sam Howell, because otherwise, then you'd spend a 25th overall pick on a backup quarterback, and you just in the Lions position, you can't do that. Like, you don't have that luxury. You need to fill needs, and backup quarterback. Well, yes, is a need.
Yeah, you're not the Niners. You're not the Niners. You can't spend a top 10 pick on a backup quarterback.
And you're not giving the kid a chance to prove himself either by making him a backup quarterback for the year and then still taking another quarterback. Like,
well, the idea of always not having him start right away is for him to learn the system.
Right, but at the same time, by not doing that and then taking a quarterback in the first round the next year, one, you're destroying the confidence of a young quarterback.
No, it's true.
And two, by not allowing him to showcase and not allowing him to sink or swim, essentially, you then bring up the question mark of, when we get to next year's draft, do we take a quarterback high in that draft? Why? Or why? Like, why not? Wouldn't we? Well, the why not becomes because you haven't seen what you already have. You haven't given him an opportunity. So that brings this like question mark into the back of the front office's mind of, should we do it? The answer should be yes, no matter what. And I don't like it doesn't, that question shouldn't even be there in my mind. And that's why I'm a little hesitant for the Lions to take a quarterback, because I do think they would hesitate to take a quarterback in next year's draft. And that's
like, so you would start Sam Howell day one, though?
Not necessarily day one, but
that's all I'm saying.
Week 4. I would start him.
Any of them might be a little early, but
I don't even care. I need, if we're drafting,
you're not going anywhere next year anyway, so it probably shouldn't even be a debate.
A quarterback in this first round, I need to see him for most of this upcoming season.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
I don't.
Why the hell did we do this? Because I need to know that we are still going to be taking a quarterback at the top of the draft next year. Unless the only reason I don't want to take a quarterback at the top of next year's draft is if Sam Howell comes out and dominates.
Now, what if one of the Ohio State receivers is sitting there with your second pick
at 25? Oh, hell yeah, I'm taking him. That fills a need long term. Absolutely. I am literally fine with any position.
Todd McShay has Chris Olave still being available at 28.
Take him. Absolutely.
He does have Garrett Wilson going at 20 to the Eagles. 2 straight years they take a wide receiver in the first round, if that's the case.
That sounds like the Lions of like...
Oh, actually 3 straight years. I forgot about Jalen Reagor.
That sounds like the Lions of the mid-2000s. Yeah. But my point is, like, you have so many holes you got to fill. I would much rather see them fill those holes than go after a guy who probably isn't going to be your answer at that position of need.
By the way, you're spot on with the Lions thing, because there's only been one team to take a wide receiver in the first round in 3 consecutive drafts. That is the Lions from 03 to 05.
Yep. I knew it. It was actually a little bit earlier than I thought. I thought it was like 2005, 2008, but I guess 03 to 05 makes sense.
Yeah. But so as it stands right now, if this Todd McShay mock draft were by some insane work of coincidence is how it actually shakes out for the Lions on draft day, where we come out of the first round with Aiden Hutchinson and Sam Howell. Would you or would you not be disappointed?
I mean, I can't be disappointed with Aiden Hutchinson. I would be a little bit. I can't say I'd be disappointed about Sam Howell. I'd be nervous. Like it wouldn't be a pick that would say give me the utmost confidence in this front office. Let me put it that way. Because
you'd rather take Chris Olave over.
Yes, absolutely. Because again, that fills a need long term. Sure, he could bust. That's fine. But a wide receiver taken at 25 is far more likely to succeed than a quarterback taken at 25, especially when that quarterback taken at 25 is the fifth guy at his position off the board. That doesn't, lead itself to success there. That's where I'd have to worry. So, no, I'd be a little bit worried about the front office if that's what they did.
All right, real quick before we move on to the Pistons, Lions getting 2 touchdowns this week against the Cardinals. You taking it?
No.
Outside of this past week, they've been covering.
Cool. I'll be honest with you. I'm not touching this team with a 10-foot pole the rest of the year.
I agree. Maybe depending what the spread is, I'd be interested in the Falcons game. But other than that, yeah.
I'm not touching this team with a 10-foot pole for the rest of the year.
Let's move on to the Pistons. They're in the midst of a 12-game losing streak. Their most recent game against the Nets, though, we did see an interesting shakeup where Saban Lee basically absorbed Corey Joseph minutes, and Corey Joseph did not play. And on top of that, Saban Lee looked damn good in those minutes. Do you expect to see this going forward? Saban Lee over Corey Joseph in the lineup?
I want to say I hope so, but I'll be honest.
I definitely
with you,
hope so.
I'll be honest with you. With the way I've watched Dwayne Casey orchestrate his lineups, I don't have confidence that it's going to happen. I have a full feeling that you're going to see a lot of ups and downs with the minutes. I have a feeling Saban Lee's minutes are going to be very much like a roller coaster for a while.
Well, so this is close to Chrissy James Edwards, but he'd asked Casey after the game about Saban Lee playing, and Casey said, I talked to Corey yesterday and let him know we'd look at Saban first. When you lose 11 in a row, you can't stay the same. It's not Corey's fault, just to give us a different vibe. So that's why I kind of bring it up. I wonder if this losing streak is finally communicated to Dwayne Casey, hey, something's not working. You got to change it up. And the first domino to fall, maybe it was Corey Joseph getting benched in favor of Saban. That's where I'm coming from with this.
I don't think it's going to be a long-term situation, though. I don't think he's going to say, all right, Saban Lee's the guy moving forward. I think he's going to ride the hot hand with Saban Lee for now. As soon as Saban Lee puts up a dud game, you'll probably see Corey Joseph's minutes start to creep back up. Because I'll be honest with you, I've been given zero reason to believe that Dwayne Casey has any confidence in Saban Lee's ability.
All right, so then what you're saying right now, though, that this is Saban's gig to lose right now. These are his minutes to lose.
Yes and no, because I don't think it's anyone's gig right now. I think it's just Saban Lee was good last night, so he's going to get the run again next week or next game. And that's all it is. That's not, he hasn't earned the job. He hasn't taken it from Corey Joseph. He just played well enough to continue to have the minutes for one game. And if he plays a bad game, well, it's gone again. He's back down to the bottom of the bench where he was. And Corey Joseph will be launched back into that role. And when Corey Joseph screws up, they'll probably try something else.
I'm hoping this is something more permanent, because I do anticipate some ups and downs with Saban Lee, considering he's still in the second year in the league. But I remember I'd been saying that I do not buy that Saban Lee is all of a sudden just miraculously better, this much better after going to the G League. But he looked significantly better on Sunday night than I've seen him play.
It was one game.
I know. I'm not overreacting. I'm saying he looks significantly better than on Sunday night than I've seen him play previously. Which
yes, he
I would want to keep
played.
Like you said, I would want to keep riding that and see, is this actually a permanent change? Was this a confidence boost that he got from the G League that caused some improvement in his game, or was it just a flash in the pan kind of thing? And maybe next game or a couple games from now, he goes back and puts up a dud. So
he played a nice game, but I do think Casey's got a short leash on him, and you know what? That's okay. That doesn't.
The second-year player, he's going to have a second-year player, a second-round pick at that, so he's going to have a short leash.
I will. Let me ask you this though, and I mentioned something to you and our buddy Alex during the game that I saw something I liked, but I actually have a different thought on it now. How did you like seeing Saban Lee working alongside Cade Cunningham?
Offensively, I like the way it flowed, because what Saban Lee provided alongside Cade that no one else on this team can provide the two was athleticism, was the dynamic that Cade can be the shooter, Saban can be the cutter. And obviously it didn't mean that Cade wasn't, looking for a shot too and driving the lane, because he's fully capable of doing that. But it gave this offense a different way to score out of the backcourt that we hadn't seen yet. And that's really what I loved about it. Do I want Saban to start permanently? No, that's not what I'm saying. But I would like to see some more lineups with Saban and Cade together.
So here's what I saw in that game. And here's where I'm going to actually disagree with you, because I did not see Saban being the cutter. I saw Saban dominating the basketball and being successful with it.
Mm-hmm. That's what I mean. Like I'm not talking about cutter like roll man. I'm talking about someone who can drive to the basket and score relying on his athleticism rather than relying on Cade to kind of set up a shot for him.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about.
My issue with that is that takes the ball out of Cade Cunningham's hands way too much. There were far too many possessions when they were both on the floor where I watched Cade either sitting up at the top of the perimeter or sitting in the corner. And that, in my mind, just cannot happen when you have a Cade Cunningham type player on the floor. That cannot happen. And so if that means that Saban Lee can't play alongside Cade Cunningham, because I'll be honest with you, offensively speaking, I don't think Saban Lee knows what to do off ball when Cade Cunningham has the ball, because I didn't see that he did. Yeah. I saw a lot of good when Saban had the ball in his hands. I did not see a lot of good when he didn't. Yeah. And that's where I'm saying,
it's nothing new though. Like Cade's he hasn't been the primary ball handler for a whole game yet. And even when he is on the floor, there's a lot of times where Jeremy Grant will dominate the ball and Cade will be kind of relegated, just kind of hanging out around the perimeter while Grant plays ISO. It's the kind of thing I've hated, is I've hated seeing so much ISO ball in the fourth quarter.
And you know what? That's probably why there's been such a lack of success with this team.
No, I agree. 100% agree.
That's why I'm not advocating for this to be something that we should applaud. Like, I don't want to see a situation where a guy can't coexist with Cade Cunningham having the ball in his hands. Like, I can't have a situation where they only work when they have the ball in their hands. Like, Saban Lee doesn't work without the ball in his hands. Well, Cade Cunningham's not really showing that he works without the ball in his hands, because every single time he does, someone else is the one taking the shot, not necessarily Cade. And when they can't work together like that I can't play them alongside each other. So while it was fun and nice to see, and it was nice to see somebody else contributing with Cade on the floor, it still didn't really work. And that was proven in the second half of that game as well. So that's where I have to, pump the brakes on the excitement of Saban's game and say, okay, that was nice, but he may not really work with Cade Cunningham on the floor. So maybe we move him back to the bench. Like I'm still in the belief that we need to move both Hayes and Sadiq Bey to the bench and bring up Josh Jackson or Frank Jackson or Hamidou Diallo to play the 2 and the 3. And I'm okay with that. Granted, that means Jeremy Grant's got to be back, and that's not the case right now. But and I'm okay with that. And yes, I know it creates holes on the starting unit, but it makes the bench unit a whole hell of a lot better. 2, if you put one of those 3 guys alongside Cade Cunningham, those 3 guys can work off ball a little bit, especially Frank Jackson. He's great in spot up shooting. Yes, defensively, that's a big liability, but in today's NBA, you got to just outscore the other team. That's just a fact. And
it is a lot harder to play defense in today's NBA.
It is. And in the regular season, in all reality, you can get away with a lineup like that. Let's be real. The Blazers have done it for years. You can get away with a lineup where you have a undersized 2 guard, which in all reality, Cade can cover that guy if he wants to, and you can have Frank Jackson covering a guy who's his height at the point. He's not a great defender, but at least it's a better matchup for him. So it could work out. But that's more of something that I want to see, because that can coexist. That can work together. But
I'm at the point with this team, like I am no longer in a position to say no to any kind of lineup mix-up, because you lose 12 in a row. Like, something's got to change. You can't keep doing the same thing over and over and over again.
No question about it. Like, something definitely has to change. It's not working as of right now, so they've got to do something to make it work.
So here's one interesting change real quick. James Edwards III, thought he'd be reported, asked Dwayne Casey actually about if he'd considered sending Sadiq Bey to the G League just to see some confidence and to see the shots go in. Dwayne Casey responded saying, it's not out of the question for any of our young guys. If guys want to get reps, they can do that. It's never a demotion for guys to come down there and play. He went on to say that G League game reps are big for young guys because practice time is diminished in the season, so it gets them some confidence, gets them some reps. And so it does sound like it's something that has been discussed. I'm curious about your take. We've talked about potentially getting Killian sometime in the G League, but we haven't really talked about Sadiq.
You know, I'm going to say no on this one. Reasons because Sadiq's a guy who needs to continue to work and cut his teeth in the NBA. And it's because we saw the way he saw, like, he set a level of expectation for himself last year.
Yeah.
And to see him get sent down to the G League this year, I don't know if that's necessarily going to be a recipe for success. I do think giving him an opportunity to have some more space by maybe working with the bench units a little bit better of an idea. And I also think he needs to work on his leadership a little bit. Leadership on the floor. And the best way for him to do that is by working with the guys that he needs to lead. And so I would much rather see Sadiq move into a bench role as, still playing 25, 30 minutes as a six man and work his way back into the starting lineup that way, not necessarily sending him all the way down to the G League, because I don't think that's something that'll instill confidence in a second-year player that's supposed to be a leader on the floor for you.
Well, in general, like, I'll say this. Especially for a guy like Sadiq Bey, I think just seeing the shot fall is going to instill confidence.
Yes, I'll agree with that also.
But are we saying like he's gone completely cold like in script? I know Dwayne Casey said like practice time has been very limited, obviously in the regular season, but like has he gone completely cold in practice too? Like is he not seeing the shots fall in scrimmages and stuff? Like that's what I'm curious about.
Which that right there, if that's the
shots
case,
fall
like,
is seeing shots fall. Like whether it's
right.
The G
well, I
League,
mean, there's a difference between seeing shots fall in practice, seeing shots fall in the game. There's a big difference there. But like, if he's not hitting
cocky.
it,
I see shots fall in practice. I think I'm the MVP.
Well, I don't understand that, but I want to see Sadiq. Like I do think seeing shots fall for Sadiq will help him, but I think it needs to happen in games. Like I think he needs to get comfortable again shooting the ball in the game because he's not making anything right now, inside or outside. He's making nothing, and so you can shoot shots until you're blue in the face in practice. That doesn't mean it's going to translate to the game. But once he starts seeing them fall in the game, it'll give him some confidence. And that's why I'm saying move him to a bench role where it's a little bit, the defense isn't as tight. The game's not as fast. It's able to slow down a little bit. And he's able to get a more comfortable shot off and see it fall in a game. And I don't think that's something he can gain in the G League because it's not the same type of play. It's different. Yeah. Versus in making shots in an NBA game, even if it's against the bench unit, that's going to instill some confidence in the kid, and he's going to be able to work himself back into a starting role at that point.
Yeah, Dwayne Casey did actually talk a bit more about Sadiq, saying that Sadiq has got to continue to be Sadiq. Don't overthink it. Play. When he misses one, I think he pressed a little too much. He's a great kid. He's a student of the game. He comes back and works at night. He watches every game, and it sounds like Sadiq himself kind of has a good mindset about this because he talked about shots not falling. He said it's good for me. I try to work on my game as hard as I can every day. When the adversity hits, I work harder. Later in my career, I'm going to look down the line and see how I got out of this. So, like, obviously, you don't expect him to say, "Yeah, this sucks. It's permanent." But like,
right, like the question does have to be raised. Like, is Sadiq Bey going to be a part of the future of this franchise? But again, I am going to just say that I do think it's a bit of a sophomore slump. Not even a bit, but a lot of a sophomore slump. Yeah. You tend to see regression when a guy comes on in a big way into the league like that. It just happens that way. But this takes it a little bit further than your average sophomore slump. Let me just say that.
Another guy on this team I want to talk about, Cade Cunningham. He's really come on strong as of late, but apparently Dave Bing doesn't think so.
Yeah, well, Dave Bing's an old senile man.
Dave Bing, I'm not going to give you the whole entire interview here, but just to paraphrase, he doesn't believe Cade Cunningham is a guy that you build around, and which completely confuses me because he's the exact kind of guy that you build around in today's NBA. I don't know what kind of player Dave Bing thinks you build around. I'm very curious to find out.
Like that makes me question, like, does Dave Bing not think you build around a guy like Luka Doncic?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Like,
saying.
how can you not? Because they are similar player types, not necessarily the same type of play, like the same player, but their play styles are pretty similar. So to say you can't build around a guy like that, like, how? Like, he does everything on the floor. Is that not what you want? Like, I'll be honest with you, I would much rather build around a guy like that who does everything pretty damn well over a guy who's just a scorer. You know, because scorers are normally your number 2 guy on the team. The guy who leads and who runs the show does it all. A la LeBron, Jokic, Giannis, Randall, for one. The Luka, the list goes on and on. Like, those guys do it all for their teams. And the scorers are normally the second fiddle. Look at Kyrie with LeBron. Like, there's a perfect example.
Yeah. Can you imagine if Dave Bing was like the GM or owner of this team saying that? Like there would be a riot in this city.
I think they shouldn't even allow the man in the building for saying that.
Yeah. That was one of the more confusing takes I heard this week. Another take. This is one courtesy. It's not really a take. This is actually a report courtesy of Shams. Jeremy Grant is, even despite the thumb injury, is still one of the most sought after players in the league in terms of the trade market, and Lakers and Trailblazers are among the teams pursuing him. Do you think Grant actually does get dealt before the deadline this year?
You know, I'm starting to lean more towards yes. And well, I was a little hesitant to begin with, and I've thrown around making him available quite a bit, but doing it for the right price. But now that we're in a situation with Jeremy Grant where right now it's obvious he's on a team-friendly deal, but you've only got one more year left on that deal.
Yeah.
So he's going to probably command close to a max contract for his next free agency deal, which do the Pistons want to pay a max contract for Jeremy Grant? Probably not. And let's be honest, I wouldn't either. Like I personally wouldn't want to give him that type of money because he's probably going to be asking close to 30 mil like that. Yeah.
Jeremy's at his peak value right now.
Exactly. So if I were the Pistons, I would be looking to move him before he walks for nothing. So yeah,
let's not make the same mistake we made with Drummond, where we could have traded him at a point in time for a nice haul. And
right. And
we sat on it.
Another reason why I think you could be looking at a situation where he does get dealt is we are now, after seeing what we've seen through 25, 26 games now, we are seeing a team that is a little bit further away from winning than we had previously expected. You know, Cade's been nice, inconsistent, but nice. But some of the other guys aren't quite there and aren't quite the pieces we may have thought they were going to be. So that means that we're still a couple more pieces than we had previously thought away from being able to win. And I know I said last week that, maybe we give up on on continuing to try to draft high and go after guys like established players like Sabonis or LeVert, which I still think we should do. Don't get me wrong. But looking at the way this team is structured and the talent we have here, I'm not exactly opposed to adding another top 5 pick to this roster. Not anymore. And that's where I said I wanted to revisit something I mentioned last week. Because while I am sick of drafting high, I don't want to be the Phoenix Suns or the Sacramento Kings of old. Like, I don't want to be continuing to draft in the top 5 every single year. And as of right now, that seems to be their trend. But I wouldn't hate adding one more top 5 pick piece to this roster. But I do think it is crucial that we add an established vet to at least be one of the top 3 guys on this team. So I think you need a little bit of both. And if that pushes the timeline back one more year, well, that's what we got to do. But if that's the case, then Jeremy Grant absolutely is not in the timeline for this team. So you got to trade him.
And speaking of Jeremy Grant trades, James Edwards had actually put out an article today, as of this recording, talking about something we talked about last week, which was the possibility of trading for one of the guys that's caught in the midst of the Pacers fire sale, a la Miles Turner, Karis LeVert, Domantas Sabonis. One of the ideas he threw out was kind of a Grant for Turner, straight up trade, not straight up, like a trade centering around Miles Turner for Jeremy Grant. Is Miles Turner the kind of haul you'd be interested in getting back for Jeremy Grant?
Not really. I mean, Miles Turner's a good player. But I don't think he's a player you can argue putting as one of your core three guys on a championship caliber team. Like I think he would have to be kind of like a fourth or fifth guy in your starting lineup. Like he's the center that just kind of anchors you down. He's the big man in the middle, but he's not necessarily a guy you can rely on to be a huge piece late in games. And
but he does fill a huge hole.
He does, absolutely. But I think this team has a lot of holes too. Like, I would absolutely much rather go after a guy like Domantas Sabonis over a guy like Miles Turner. Now, I don't think you're getting Sabonis for Jeremy Grant straight up. That's not even realistic. But maybe you find a way to get a 3-team deal done that does net you Sabonis. And frankly, the one thing I am potentially seeing the Pistons do is be that third team in a 3-way deal that ends up shipping Jeremy Grant off somewhere and getting picks in a bad contract in return, or getting a player in a pick or something along those lines. And it may not be sexy, but it may be necessary. And I don't want to be in a situation where we're just getting rid of Jeremy Grant so that we get something for him, because I do think we have some leverage here. But I do think this is the time to move him. And would you want to go Jeremy Grant for Miles Turner straight up? Because it doesn't excite me that much, because I think we're downgrading the roster a little bit at that point.
My number one that I've talked about this before, my number one thing I want for Jeremy Grant is draft capital. But if there is like a player that I think we can get in turn for Jeremy Grant, I do feel like Miles Turner is probably one of those better actual player assets that we would be looking at as return for Jeremy Grant. A 25-year-old floor spacing, shot blocking big. I don't know how much better in terms of a physical player asset you can expect to get for Jeremy Grant. I know, you know me, I like to scour Pistons Reddit a lot. I did see, I've seen a bunch of trade scenarios thrown around. I've seen people in terms of Portland, for example, talk about like Covington and Anthony Simons, for example, which those are some interesting pieces. Anthony Simons, especially. Covington probably doesn't really fit our timeline. I've seen like with the Clippers, Serge Ibaka, Vika Zubac. But that doesn't excite me.
Why the hell would that
not
be
one
exciting?
bit.
Like, both those guys are. Serge Ibaka is essentially useless in today's league, and Vika Zubac, like, he's not even a good center on a bad team.
Obviously, we've heard about the Marvin Bagley trade rumors, and there have been people that
give me a lot more than just Marvin Bagley.
There are people that are talking about like Marvin Bagley in a first and stuff like that, like maybe a first and a second. So, but in terms of actual material player asset, like a player we get in return, I'm not sure how much better it gets than Miles Turner in return for Jeremy Grant.
And you're not wrong there. Like, that does fill a need, but I still think that does downgrade the roster a little bit. Like, we're losing a lot of scoring in Jeremy Grant in that regard, and that hurts. Yeah, we help down low, but then it does make Isaiah Stewart a moot point because it relegates him to a bench role. So we upgrade.
No, he play the 4 for now.
Can't shoot.
But then if in the draft, if we end up with a guy like Banchero for something or Chet Holmgren, then Isaiah Stewart's going off the bench.
You're asking Isaiah Stewart to play a position that he hasn't shown he can play. Like, yeah, it'd be nice to see Isaiah Stewart move to the 4, but he hasn't shown that he can actually legitimately stretch the floor at all. So are we just going to clog the lane entirely with two guys who can't really stretch the floor very much?
I'd be interested in the experiment because we haven't given him a ton of minutes at the 4. So I'd be actually very interested in the experiment. No, do we know if he can do it? No, we don't. We've seen him hit threes. We know that. It's not like we haven't seen players not stretch the floor, then suddenly be able to stretch the floor. Look at
I understand.
Jonas Valanciunas, Brook Lopez, but
yes.
It'd be an experiment I'd be interested in seeing. I don't know if it'll work, but I'd be interested in it.
My worry is with that, it'd be interesting to see it, but it's not like the Pistons weren't already in a position to at least test it out. You know what I mean? Like, they could have tested it out with Olynyk and Isaiah Stewart, or with Plumlee and Isaiah Stewart. Like, they've never really been in a position that they couldn't afford to do it. One, they weren't winning, so it doesn't matter. Two, you could move Jeremy Grant down to the 3, or if you wanted to put him on the bench and run a rotation with Stewart at the 4, that's fine. Like, you had options and had the ability to do it, but the fact they haven't doesn't really make me believe that he's capable. So I don't know. It makes me worry about what we have. Like, it makes me worry whether or not they even think Isaiah Stewart's good enough to be the guy. Yeah. because that tells me they don't believe he is, and that's worrying. But either way, like we're starting to see some of the holes. Like we were very excited about the last year's draft class. There's no question about it. But we're starting to see some of the detractors and the factors that tell us maybe we shouldn't have been as excited. Like, I still think these guys can be good players, and Bay, I think, can be a really good player, but maybe we should have kind of tempered our expectations.
Maybe it's me being stubborn. I'm still not, like, panicking about Sadiq Bey.
No, and I'm not really either. Like,
I've seen too much to go back on it now. Like,
I'll be honest, I am starting to get, like, the panic meter starting to rise, beginning to, because I have seen such a regression, and I mean, we've seen the numbers. The team he is quite literally a detriment to this team right now, and is a big reason why they're losing games. But I'm not quite ready to give up on the guy. He's a second-year player. Now, it doesn't help that he's not exactly a young player. He's a lot older than most second-year players, so that's not a good sign. But I'm not ready to just give up on the guy. I'm not even close to that, because I do think he can be a really good player in this league.
But speaking of bigs that suddenly develop a 3-point shot, is that happening with Dwight Howard? I remember he went 2 for 2 against us last month from 3-point land, which completely shocked me. And I don't know if he's been doing it all season, but I just remember the game he played against us.
I think it's more of a gimmick than anything with Dwight Howard.
Like, that's the one thing I never thought I'd see. You know, Dwight Howard trying to a stretch.
Like, when I picture Dwight Howard shooting, I don't picture pretty smooth stroke. Like, I see very clunky, weird.
I mean, it didn't
awkward.
look terrible, I'll tell you that. But yeah, I still don't picture him as being a stretch big. But you said you did have a take on the Pacers that you wanted to.
Well, that was my take. That
was it.
That was my take. That maybe I my expectations and thoughts on where this team is are a little bit too high. Maybe we are even a year further than I would say, and maybe we do push it down the line by a year by being okay with taking guys in the top 5. Now, I'll say this. I would not necessarily still be excited if we got a first-round pick for Jeremy Grant, and I have a reason for that. I don't want to be a team that's just here to stack first-round picks anymore. If we continue to take our top 5 guy and this upcoming draft and we add that to what we already have, that's fine. That's just where we landed. But if we're trading away assets, actual assets, for draft picks to then kick the can down the road, that's not what I want. And that's what I want to avoid doing.
Here's a way I think of it. So I've already stated that I anticipate 2023 to be our big free agency offseason. Then after that offseason, I fully expect this team to be ready to compete. I expect to have, between what we got with Cade Cunningham, the guys who drafted last season, and potentially another top 5 pick in this draft, like, we should fully have our young core set, and then adding a big name free agent, hopefully, if we can throw enough money at them.
It's going to depend on how much money you actually have. Because you got some contracts to re-sign on the dotted line.
But so, like, my whole idea is, 2023, this team shouldn't even be thinking about the draft. We'll be competing. I'm fully anticipating this to be a playoff team by 2023, like that season. Now, when you add into the mix that we're competing for a playoff spot, but in our back pocket, we have an additional first-round pick from a team we traded Jeremy Grant to, that we can continue to add young pieces to this team and continue to get some depth. I don't see how you can go wrong with that personally. I don't see it as like hoarding draft picks. I see it more as you can continue to compete without worrying about still being able to add young assets.
if that is our year to start winning, where we get that big free agent signing, we've got Cade, we've got the top 5 pick in this upcoming draft, but then we add another guy to it that's a first round pick. Normally, my expectations are based on the teams who are interested in Jeremy Grant. This pick ain't going to be very high. It's going to be somewhere in the 20s likely. Well, if that's the case, then he's probably not going to be contributing all that much in the first couple of years.
Unless you take a pick like 2 or 3 years down the road. Probably 3 years down the road.
Well, then what the hell does that add to us to start winning at that point?
So, like, let's say you took 2 years. Let's say you took the 2023 pick. Like, maybe by then LeBron is out of LA or something. and they're not quite as good. Maybe you get like the 20th overall pick.
I don't think the Lakers have that pick. I'll be honest with you. Like, I don't think the Lakers can. I don't think the Lakers have a first round pick for like 3 years.
Portland, maybe the Dame Lillard stuff comes to a head. He gets traded, and they're suddenly not as good.
Portland. I think Dame's going to re-sign with Portland. I think McCollum's on his way out, but I firmly believe that this pick will not be in the lottery. Let me just.
I'm not expecting. No, I'm not expecting that.
If that's the case,
not at all.
Like, how much is that guy going to add?
It may be if you trade him to Indiana, it possibly could be.
Sure, but how much is that player, that guy taken at 20, going to add to a team who wants to win now?
I said a young depth piece. That's what I said.
Yeah, but see, wouldn't you rather have a Miles Turner at that point? Because I would. Because that's not a young depth piece. That's a guy ready to win now.
That's what I said. I said Miles Turner is probably the best I can think of for an actual player you're getting in return.
But my point is, like, there's other guys like that out there. I would rather.
And he's young enough, right, where he fits the timeline too.
But I would rather have the known commodity. Like if you were to say Jeremy Grant.
If you were asking me Miles Turner a pick, I'm taking Miles Turner. That's
all right. Karis LeVert or the pick.
I think Karis LeVert makes us better right now. He's another guy that fills a
Granted, I think you'd have to give him a little bit more than just Jeremy Grant.
That was another one that in that article, I didn't want to go through the whole article, but James Hurd was talking about that too, and he said that like you're probably looking at you might have to give up like a package of Killian plus like one of Diallo or Josh Jackson, maybe a second round pick or something. But yeah, I think that makes us better right away because you add that scoring power, like that scoring punch that this team really needs in the starting lineup. Does it have to be now? James Edwards had made a point of he would rather us not do it and wait till next year when it's an expiring contract kind of thing. That way we don't impact our draft capital for this year.
Doing it that way,
what if he gets traded and then and then now he's not available next year? Like
doing it that way does open the door to some of the worst teams in the league being interested in him. Mm-hmm. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Whereas right now, some of the bad teams in the league probably won't be interested in him because what's the point? Mm-hmm. Some of the bad teams may be interested in him as an expiring deal at that point because they may be looking to make a splash in free agency to try to bring this back. So that does open the door a little bit more to getting a higher pick if that's the route you want him to go.
Mm-hmm. It's a very plausible route. But yeah, in terms of player personnel, it's Karis LeVert makes his team immediately better. Do I pull the trigger on it? I think I'd rather go for Miles Turner, but I would.
Karis LeVert fills a need too. He fills a big need too.
But like a scorer is not someone that's like it's not someone that's going to be super hard to find. Whereas someone like Miles Turner is a little tougher to find in this league. That's why I said I'd rather do Miles Turner.
You're not wrong. But either way, the Pistons are going to have a lot of decisions to make. Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, I do think Troy Weaver, I almost called him Trade Weaver. I do think Troy Weaver. Wrong. No, I know. But I do think he would be interested in possibly parting with him. Like I don't think it's necessarily the wrong decision depending on what he gets. If you're only getting draft capital and it's late first draft capital, then I think that's probably the wrong decision. Because again, that guy's probably not going to put you where you want to be, at least not to where a different offer may have or where Jeremy Grant would have. Mm-hmm. So, but if it's for a player like a Miles Turner, that may be a little different.
But that's everything I have on this sad team right now. I think we squeezed that orange for all the juice it's got, if you ask me.
I don't disagree. I mean, there's only so much you can talk about with a 4-22 team. Yeah, like we're not able to talk too much about winning basketball right now. We're talking about how do we build this thing back to where we thought it was going to be.
Hey, conclusion: don't rule out any lineup changes. Try everything and anything, and don't be afraid to dip your toe in the trade market.
Absolutely.
I guess that's the conclusion.
Absolutely agree. I'll be honest. I
one.
think all bets are off when it comes to who on this roster could be traded. Like I think anybody is available, not named Cade Cunningham. I'd agree. I wouldn't be stupidly shocked to see a trade that involves Sadiq Bey or Killian Hayes or Isaiah Stewart. Like there is a very realistic possibility that one of those guys could be traded. And would I be mad about it? Not necessarily. Depending on what we got in return, not necessarily.
I wonder what kind of haul you get if you package like a Sadiq Bey. You package Jeremy Grant with one of those 3 rookies from last year.
It has to be big. I'll be honest with you. It has to be big because you're giving up a lot of upside there. Because it's not like Jeremy Grant's that old.
No,
he's under contract, and so is the rook. Or the young guy. Anyways, anything else, Dad?
No, that is everything I have. It was a lot.
All right, let's close it out then. Thank you guys for listening. We will catch you next week. Thank you to Detroit Sports Podcast. Andrew, thank you as well for joining me. Follow us on Twitter at Real Fan Report, and we will catch you guys next week. This has been the Fan Reporters. Bye, fans.
You know, I bought tickets to the Pistons game on Saturday to watch Cade versus Jalen, and Jalen's probably not going to play. 4 fans.
I'm pretty sure he's guaranteed to not play at this point, from what I've heard. But you know what? That's the risk you take by buying tickets that far in advance. Imagine how people feel buying tickets to go watch LeBron play, and he has a load management day. Yeah. So that's the risk you take. But anyways, thank you guys for listening. We'll catch you next week. Have a good one. Peace out.
Peace.